Good evening and welcome to BUGAJSKI Hour. It is good to be back again in Tirana to examine important global and local developments that affect the lives of all Albanians. And tonight I will be discussing some key economic questions that will impact on all Albanian citizens. And our guest on the BUGAJSKI hot seat is Albania's Minister of Energy and Industry, Damian Gjiknuri. But first I'll give you my American perspective on the world. And my topic today is titled The Imperative of NATO's Revival. NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen has described Russia's attack on Ukraine as a quote-unquote wake-up call. At NATO's September summit in Wales, all members must take tough decisions, including increased defense spending to demonstrate commitment to the security of all NATO allies. NATO remains the vital component of Western defense, and its reinvigorated mission must focus on protecting the independence and territorial integrity of each ally. Above all, it must upgrade the defense capabilities of all countries bordering Russia. Strengthened alliance defenses can deter Russia's aggression, while a weak reaction will simply undermine NATO credibility. NATO has taken initial steps to strengthen the defense of new members. It added combat aircraft to support the Baltic air policing mission and dispatched a dozen F-16 fighters to Poland, together with 300 US troops. But much more needs to be done, including regular NATO exercises and the positioning of NATO infrastructure from Estonia to Romania. NATO must also repudiate the 1996 NATO-Russia Founding Act, in which it pledged not to permanently base combat forces on the territory of new members in Central and Eastern Europe. This agreement was contingent upon Russian behavior. NATO now has the right to move its bases from Western Europe to Eastern Europe as the threat from Russia has re-emerged. For Moscow to understand the costs of invasion, Western defense aid to Ukraine, Georgia, and other vulnerable states must be increased. Ukraine's army urgently needs assistance to create a credible territorial defense force that would make Russian occupation costly. NATO's revived mandate can also be strengthened by inviting Montenegro and Macedonia into the alliance at the September summit. Simultaneously, Ukraine and Georgia need membership action plans to confirm that they too will join the alliance and that Moscow's pressure tactics will have the reverse effect. It is time for the BUGAJSKI hot seat, and our guest today is the Albanian Minister of Energy and Industry, Damian Gjiknuri. Thank you very much, Damian, for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
A lot of questions, mostly about energy, but I also want to cover some of the other industries, some of the other sectors that you cover. Maybe we can begin if you can give us an overview of the energy picture in Albania. In other words, what is the structure of the energy sector? How much is available domestically? How much is imported from outside? Just so we know where Albania stands in this sort of energy mix, energy dependence.
Right. Okay, and it's good you started with the energy. Energy is a hot topic in every country, and also in the coming days, it's becoming more and more important for countries, for European Union, but for any country in the modern world is fighting a lot to secure the energy, to have the, I don't want to call it energy independence, because maybe sometimes it's kind of archaic term, but every country wants to have a secure supply of energy to keep the economy going, to keep the population functioning, and the energy is like the oxygen for the body, and every nation needs it. How Albania stands in the energy sector? Of course, the energy sector, I can tell you straight away, it's a problematic sector. It's a sector which has inherited a lot of problems, especially the electricity sector, the power sector.
Yeah, I was going to go into electricity.
Yeah, the power sector is the most problematic one. Not only due to the fact that we lack the resources to cover all our needs, which also bring the question of supply on the long run, or supply with a sort of affordable price, but also of the question how it was managed, how it functioned, the market model, the financial structure of it, the financial situation of the power sector, which brings many challenges that this government have to deal with the energy, and which is a sector which will require many years of work. It's not something you can just easily solve it. You have a bullet points, you have a brilliant idea, and you roll out, and you have the results in 1 year. It will take serious reforms, serious issues, and especially some of the issues which are accumulated should be addressed now. Now, in brief, to be more concrete, because your question was very concrete, Albania, all our power needs are supplied by one source, which we have. It's water. So our energy is totally depending on the hydrological condition and the weather patterns. These have increased the vulnerability and the exposure of the country in years when we don't have a good weather condition. Like, for example, this year, as we speak, has been a good year with some little changes. Hopefully in the last days we've had some unexpected rainfalls and snowfalls, but in general there was no winter, which has increased the pressure for finding resources to import electricity to supply the needs of the country. And that brings the issue of the strategy for diversification and supply, the constant supply of power demand. So the power sector is the sector that is suffering mostly, due also to the fact that, as I said, the market model plus the distributions part of the segment has been inherited in a very bad shape. And I'm talking here about a failed privatization. I'm talking about CES. Maybe there was a question.
Yeah, I was going to come to the whole CES question in a while.
So let me touch the real issues on the segment. So it's the distribution side, which has been failing a lot. Have accumulated a lot of debt, and it's been operated in a huge number of losses. And I mean the electricity losses, non-technical and technical. Technical are, let's say, at the range of 17–80%, but the rest of the electricity up to last year when we came to power was almost more than 50% of the electricity was unaccounted, was unbilled. Add to this also the low rate of collection, which was especially in the year of 2013. There was also the election year. The CES was out of the scene. There was a conflict, so there was no really a good care from the government side, given also the priorities in the election. And the situation deteriorated a lot by accumulating a debt chain which goes up to more than $1.1 billion, which is a huge amount, burden to the public, budget, and also to the public in general. Other challenges in the sector is that the price of electricity doesn't really reflect the cost, which also brought the issue of do we have to increase the prices, and nobody's happy with increasing prices. And I'm not saying we have to increase the prices, but we have to tell to the population that our price doesn't reflect the cost of electricity. And the cost of electricity is a generation cost, which includes our own generation, plus the imports, plus hydrological risk, transmission and distribution. Distribution is the most failing part, which has increased the cost, but in the meantime, as we speak, there have been another vector, another dynamic, which very few people talked about it. They were more sucked to the idea that the Albanian, the former prime minister, I'm not here now just only to criticize the former government, but that's an issue that countries is facing, which promoted the idea of developing private hydropowers everywhere, but the scheme was not made clear to the people, and the scheme is very simple. Every new generation which is being supplied by the private money, which is sustained by the private investments, the bill goes to the government, goes to the public supplier, and at the end at the consumer price.
Let us sort of dissect the sectors one by one in a moment. But before I come to that, a sort of general question, and you mentioned it already, diversification. How do you see diversification over the coming years? In other words, give me percentages. What percentage for which energy source?
We are reviewing the energy strategy of Albania, where we're going to define the specific sort of percentage of quantity that will lead up to the energy mix. However, as we are developing that, I can tell you a little bit our strategy, how we see it, why we are working in this direction. Of course, hydro is good. Hydro provides cheap, in terms of cheap energy, but it's not sustainable, and is vulnerable to the climate pattern.
It's not reliable necessarily.
Reliable. So therefore, we have to look for other sources. And a natural source that comes from not only mine, but which is becoming concrete now, it's related to some other strategic developments, which is the gas pipeline coming from the Caspian Sea towards Italy. The top is a good opportunity for the Albania to diversify its source. We do have a power plant which is unfortunately lying idle in Vlora due to some technical problems which we are going to repair. This plant is meant to work with oil and gas. Oil is a very expensive source to use as a sort of a backup or baseload energy production. And gas, it's a more natural, it's more clean, and it's more affordable. And we are looking to use the gas, part of the gas, which will come through Albania, but most of the gas will go to Europe, and we know that. But a portion of this gas, which will remain for the Albanian consumers, to be gas for power. And our strategy is to develop this, first to develop a master plan for a gas, which is master plan development for gas, where we have to locate potential sources of power, I mean the thermal power capacities. One natural one natural installation is the thermal power in Vlora, which we are working also with the International Financial Institution to fix the problem, to make the feasibility study for conversion into gas. Even it is, I mean, when I mean conversion, I mean the installations to send gas there, because this plant is working by gas, and to expand this plant if it's necessary, or to build another one in order to supply our base load needs. This is one element of diversification. In terms of reliability, we are investing in the interconnections of Albania, which means the high voltage lines with the neighboring country. Why is important? Because for a country to have reliability in supply, it's not only to develop its own sources, but also to be interconnected. Why? Sometimes you have to import, but in the meantime you have to export when there is need to export. And in order to develop the homegrown industry related to the energy, it's important to have connections with other countries. That's why we are investing with Kosovo, which I think in the long run will become very feasible, due to the fact that Kosovo have some natural advantages in lignite, some carbons. Maybe they are not very luxurious now. Everybody hates carbon, hates coal, but still coal and lignite are the cheapest.
Reliable.
Reliable is the cheapest source for producing electricity. So we want to combine those elements.
Well, as you know, Europe is now, or the European Union is now very much focused on energy diversification, particularly in the wake of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. In other words, the fear of cut-off of supplies from Russia itself. So they're looking at alternatives, and I think this is going to be increasing in European Union, particularly amongst those countries that are most vulnerable to cut-offs, particularly cut-offs in natural gas. Albania, luckily enough, you're not dependent on supplies from Russia or Central Asia or anywhere that could be disrupted. But presumably, as you enter the European Union, hopefully over the next few years, you too will be part of that energy diversification program. What does Albania have to offer in terms of, I would say, the European Union energy picture?
Albania has to offer in many ways. First of all, its geographical position. The fact that the gas pipeline will go through Albania, it brings Albania to a different stage. I'm not saying that. I don't want to just magnify that to be the most strategic country. Sometimes politicians try to magnify the positions. However, given the fact that this pipeline, which is becoming more and more important after the events in Ukraine, the position of Albania takes a certain importance. Second, we are working, and I think also European Union is understanding more now, and they're talking a lot about the diversification of supply other than Russia. And we are trying to connect Albania to transform Albania also in a hub, to connect this source with other parts of Europe, which is, we are working very closely with Montenegro and Croatia to promote the Ionian Adriatic pipeline. So that would be another venue, and Albania will gain more importance, not to the fact to be, because we cannot, not to use this strategic position to create problems vis-à-vis European Union. It's out of question, but it gives Albania a special importance now. We can use in our own benefit to strengthen the position of the country, but also to contribute a lot to European Union. And I think Europe now have to take some lessons. The crisis in Ukraine have learned a lot that dependency on a certain country is not the right policy for European Union. And European Union must dedicate efforts and finances, and in that case also bring to the attention of, and I made some days ago also in a conference in Zagreb, I said European Union must also support financially those projects, which goes in the benefit of Europe. Right. For example, not only just providing money for feasibility study, but concretely investing, because this is strategic infrastructure. This is an infrastructure which maybe businesses at the beginning are reluctant to go for, and you need strong strategic partners to invest. However, the business always goes, sees the economic side of it immediately. Where is the immediate gain? But when it comes to energy and the energy supply, and especially the gas supply, even it's a private sector domain, still it's a high public interest there, even for European Union. That's why it's a regulated market. That's why it's a market that the European Commission always pays attention and promotes diversity, because they know that the impact that the lack of supply or reliable supply can have are much higher, rather than to leave it as a kind of an open issue to be solved by private businesses. That's why I'm saying it's time for European Union to pay attention to this development and provide direct financing to make the infrastructure possible. Right. Without the infrastructure, the supply, the reliability of the supply would be always a future dream.
So the argument would be that Albania, as a potential EU member, is a contributor to European energy security, whereas unfortunately some countries already in the European Union, particularly those that have signed on to South Stream, which is this Russian planned pipeline which beat out the Nabucco West deal into Central Europe, are actually increasing that dependency unnecessarily on Russia. And as you know, Gazprom is now under investigation in terms of unbundling, in terms of its monopoly position. So presumably this is the argument you can make to the European Union. Albania is for diversification, different sources, different routes, unbundling, playing by European rules, basically.
Plus, I think one more element that Albania have to add to the security of supply to the European Union, the fact that Albania have a lot of natural resources when it comes to abundance of water, and with some very big projects which can be contributor to the surplus of electricity produced in Albania can be available to European Union countries to make a good mix and affordable and clean energy. These are elements which also add to the sort of the bigger picture. Yeah. But as you said, I mean, some countries, also Europe in the past, they have a very strange relationship when it comes to energy security with Russia. They want the cheap price of energy, but then sometimes everybody wants a cheap price, of course. Sure. But in the meantime, when you become dependent to one customer, you are completely vulnerable. So now it's time that those political crises are, for one thing, they serve, in my opinion, and maybe I'm going beyond now. I'm trying to become a political strategist. Let everybody do that.
Energy is a security question.
It's a security question. Those crises, they learn a lot and now it's time for Europe to think differently when it comes to dependency. And they can use the Southeast Europe, especially Albania, as a platform, as a good example to diversify the routes, and Albania and Greece and other countries can play a significant role as a different route for their diversification. Just Europe has to invest a little bit more, not only pay attention, to dedicate some resources which will be far better in the long run and will pay off when it comes to reliability and all other elements which are related to the energy security.
Let's turn attention now to domestic level, particularly some of the domestic problems witnessed in the energy sector, I suppose over many years. Your government has revealed massive corruption in the energy sector by the previous government. How precisely would you say has this affected energy security, state budget, consumer prices, and so forth? And beyond that, will anybody be brought to account for some of this corruption? Do you plan any investigations, any trials? And at what point, basically, will the Albanian energy sector be fully transparent and non-political?
Now, we have to see the transparency in various dimensions. One is what we actually will do in terms of to make it more transparent, in terms of the all the contracts, the races, how open is the sector, and we are working with it. Second is what you've done to unearth the past, and of course unearthing the past is not an easy thing. However, we've done what we could have done. I mean, we did what we could by also denouncing people in the prosecution office, various officials who have infringed the legislation when it comes to transparency, the fair competition. And unfortunately, the justice system in Albania is very slow to react. And I'm not going to open this chapter now because it's another thing that Albania is suffering of, the lack of accountability in the justice system. But that would require another program to discuss about that.
I'll get the justice minister.
But in terms of tools and measures, what we are doing and what we first of all, we have, as you said, we have inherited a bad situation due to the unplanned policies plus corruption, I guess, in it. Not I guess, but in reality. Unplanned policies, as I said, promoting various independent producers, maybe that was a good idea at the beginning, but nobody took into account the real price of it, which is a challenge that we have to face. Second thing, when it comes to transparency, many contracts were not also transparent. We still don't have a transparent register of all concessionaires in the ministry I'm running. And for the first time, I've dedicated some resources, and I'm working with some organization to make this register available to anybody. We will create more accountability, how the contract has been implemented, and accountability in terms of what will be the future, the competition, the future contracts. Many of these contracts have failed also to the fact that they haven't found financing. Some of them, they were simply contracts given to specific cronies or politicians which were intended to sell to the others. So they created an entry fee to the sector, which is not necessarily good. It creates obstacles to the serious investors, and that's why many of these contracts have been there on paper and no implementation has rolled on due to that fact. So this is another element that we are changing differently. We are trying to give the sector breathe, which means we have to design a proper scheme also with the new legislation that will create a private demand, liberalizing part of the market, which can serve as a consumer for some of the private investors, and to transfer the burden from the public sector. I mean the cash in that case, the energy corporation, which is a public utility in charge of supplying the electricity to the population, to transfer it to the private market and give some liquidity to the sector, which is tied now in a sort of a chain of debts and in a kind of illiquidity. Plus, when it comes to prices, you mentioned, if you will reflect the real prices of electricity as they are now, the prices would have gone much higher for the consumers. And this was unaccounted policies of the past. However, we don't want to put the burden to the consumers for the moment. We have to keep the burden as a government, and we are focusing our reforms in the abuse of electricity by fighting illegal use of electricity, by improving investing in the sector, and we are working very hard with the partners especially with the World Bank, which is ready to invest immediately by starting this year, $150 million in the sector. And I think it's a good success. If this agreement will be concluded with the World Bank, there would be a big success for this government, because we will have finances in the distribution sector which has been under-invested during all these years and have brought up the prices of the bad management and the prices of distribution side. Which means that in the long run we are intending that the prices for the population to be stable, and also create, as I said, for the industries to take out of the regulated sector. They can use the other energy sources in Albania, the independent producers, to supply directly to them and keep them prices affordable, keep supply normal, and create also for the private investors in the electricity sector a motive, an incentive to invest, because they will have a market.
Well, very concretely, for an Albanian consumer, Albanian citizen, what they're very worried about, and I hear this on the streets, is their bills are going to go up, their electricity bills, their utility bills. Is there a date, is there a plan specifically now already in place that will be implemented? You know, people worry that those that are paying are going to suffer the most, and those that haven't paid, basically the money won't be collected.
Yeah, that's why I said that we're not going to change the electricity price. This year the price is decided.
So it's not going to change this year?
No, and for the, I'm talking about population, there is a problem with the issue has come more not like the outright electricity increase, the price increase. It has to do more with the blocks, because we have two blocks of prices. One is a general subsidy for everybody, which in my opinion is wrong and many experts' opinion is wrong, but still keeps the electricity prices cheap. And the existence of two blocks, it creates opportunity for abuse by meter readers, by persons in charge of the utility. Because in order to have an exact metering, because you have an allowance of 300 kilowatt, 300 watt for electricity, that you have a very cheap price. But it has to be an exact reading, the beginning and the end of month, in order to measure that. And they don't do it normally. And there is a lot of abuse with that. And we are trying to find a different scheme that doesn't affect the families, but eliminates the abuse with the meter readers, with the people who go there and read, and which have contributed to the informality in the sector. Plus, we are fighting to stop the abuse by many businesses or many operators who are using electricity in a completely illegal way.
And don't pay the bills.
Yeah, they don't. Not only they are not even billed. Yeah, the question is not even billed. I mean, you have people who don't pay the bill, but I can live for a moment with that, and I can use other measures.
Those that aren't even charged.
Yeah, the people which are not even charged, and they are consuming electricity. This is the biggest problem.
Yeah.
That's why our direction of policies has been focused mostly on this category, fighting the abuse before going and discussing about the price reflection or different sort of pricing.
But will there be a flat price at some point?
Normally, like any country has been developing, and this is the policy of European Union, that normally they don't like the subsidies which are given to the tariff. They like that you define, or what is the practice in many countries, you define the category who is going to be subsidized, or they need assistance, which are people, vulnerable pensioners, people who are in difficult economic situation, and you find a way to supply, or you find a way to reimburse them financially, find a way and help them financially, but not to disintegrate the system, which means that the electricity price should be one for everybody. However, you need to find a scheme that really doesn't affect the general population. We are working with that. We don't want to be, let's say, too hard in our reforms, because we know that the situation is not good. People will not be happy with any increase of electricity, and people rightly say that you have to fight the abuse first and mismanagement in the sector before asking the population to increase the price. That's why it's a big challenge, to be honest, and I think for sometimes it's going to be the state budget who will sustain this burden until we have a better market model, better structuring of the system, and in the long run we have to do like any other country have done in the reform of energy.
Isn't part of the problem the lack of investment in infrastructure, distribution network. And this brings us to this ČEZ distribution network problem. Could you sort of explain what the problem is to the ordinary viewer and also to American viewers who may not quite understand it? Apparently only 50% of the energy in the network is actually paid for. I hear different figures, but you know, it's a rough calculation. And what do you intend to do about it? Do you intend to nationalize, reprivatize? You know, what are the plans?
We are in a process of trying to find a settlement with ČEZ. I mean, we inherited a conflict which was not created by us, but we have to live with it now. Albania is in arbitrage now with a Czech company. However, given the immediate needs of the system, the requirements to do investment there, to find partners, international financial institutions or banks to invest in the sector, you need to have hands untied, which means you need to own this company. As we speak now, we don't own this company. We administer by a forced administration appointed by the independent regulatory authority, which is also not normal. It cannot go like this because the regulator normally should be in the position not to administer a utility. They have to monitor the market and to enforce the rules in the market, but when you own a utility, you become a judge and the prosecutor in the meantime. So it's an ambiguous situation. Plus the fact that we need to invest there, we need the clear ownership. And in order to get the clear ownership is two ways. To nationalize the company by fair compensation or maybe zero compensation, maybe because the Czechs didn't perform well. The second is to find an amicable solution, a solution which will not harm us immediately financially, but find a way that mitigate their interests, but in the meantime mitigate our public interests and take the ownership of the company, which means the company should be under state control. The state will own the shares of the company, restructure the company, make a better management, commercialize it, and prepare it maybe for a future, privatization. After we have made all these necessary reforms, which are required also by the third package of the European Union, because ČEZ, as it was a pure monopoly in distribution and in retail, and nobody normally...
You have to unbundle.
Yeah, you have to unbundle it. You have to create also a deregulated market, and this is a big challenge. However, now is time. That's why we have opened negotiation with Czechs. I hope there will be a solution in both parties' advantage to take the clear ownership of the company, and after taking the clear ownership of the company, to provide all this assistance, international assistance, World Bank, EBRD, other financial institutions. They have been ready to promote investment in the sector, and we are working, because without investment, we have to understand it. The system is deteriorated completely, because it has been more than 8 years, nothing has been invested there. Because the previous government, before they prepared for privatization, they didn't invest anything in order, because they will say we will sell this asset, so why we should invest? 2007, 2008. After the privatization, Czechs, they invested very little. They mostly invested in a sort of facelift, offices, other things, but not really in the transmission lines or in the substations or in the metering. Now, as we speak, we have 270 customers without meters. Even that requires an immediate investment, which means almost 25% of the Albanian customers are not billed. And this is something very problematic. So, because we need immediate investments, we have to find a quick solution about this. We cannot linger in a long arbitrage. Arbitrage is another solution, but arbitrage will take many years, financial resources, and will... you probably win, you probably lose, you will probably end up when you probably would have solved this issue now with a more...
Well, how long will this process take, do you think, in your best estimate?
I think by June we will have a solution. Whether it should be an amicable solution or otherwise, we have to find a different way, an instrument to take the control, legal control of the company and fight the arbitrage until the end. But we have to take the legal control of the company, which means the ownership of the company in order to promote investment.
Are you supported by the European Union in this process?
Not really. The European Union has considered this process a matter of it's a private matter. But the financial institutions, including some of the meetings I have with the European Union institutions who are interested in the sector, they all encourage the Albanian government to find a quick solution about the distribution sector, because there is money to invest, and they understand very well, without investing in this sector, the sector will linger for a long time and they will remain illiquid.
Yeah, exactly. We will break now for a few adverts. Let's turn, you mentioned right at the beginning hydropower, how important for the electricity sector, for energy, for power in general, hydropower is. I gather your government has cancelled some of the business projects. I think you began to talk a little bit about this, and the prospects seem unclear in this sector. What is the government's development plan? Given that hydropower is subject to periodic droughts, it's unpredictable, unreliable, as we mentioned, but how do you plan to try and make it as effective as possible, as reliable as possible? Let's put it that way.
Right. Of course, we want to promote the investment in the hydropower sector, but investments which are reliable and sustainable. Mm-hmm. What I mean by this, I don't mean that, like the former government chose this policy, everybody grab a line of water and come with a project to me. You cannot do like this. This is not the way to do. This is uncontrolled development, which, especially when it's financed by the public purse, because it is financed, we have to understand it. Every private hydropower, up to a certain scale, that was the policy of the previous government, it's financed by the public purse. Mm-hmm. It's financed by the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. But they didn't even increase the price. So this burden was transferred to the government at the end. Mm-hmm. And you cannot go in an uncontrollable way, because you finance something, of course, it's good to subsidize something, but you know where you're going. I mean, you create a value chain. I'm doing that, but I'm going to get certain results in the long run. Mm-hmm. So this is, in my opinion, was completely a wrong policy, which have created also many problems. Now, how we are going to address it? What we have cancelled illegal things. We have cancelled projects which have been awarded during the transition period of the government, which normally any government, when they lose power, they are just a take care government. They hand over the power. They don't really take decisions which implicate financially the incoming government. This is a normal political logic. The second, we are trying to cancel the projects which are paper. These selling papers, these sort of notes that they have taken and they try to sell. They haven't done anything on these years, and we want to cancel them in order to recover those rights, those licenses, and in order to award to the people who really have plans and which fits with our planning in terms of the future energy.
But there won't be any political favoritism in the awarding of contracts?
No, it's going to be open tender, and without bonuses, because now those projects belong to the government. Mm-hmm. And there is no this mechanics of a certain company gets extra bonuses because they've been the first one. Mm-hmm. In that case, those they have the ownership of the government, so it's going to be a free competition for that. Another element that I want to touch is we are trying to promote some big projects in the hydropower. I know they're difficult, but they're more interesting in the long run and more needed for the country. For example, Skavica, Vjosa, or any other big project we have, hydro dams. We are trying to develop schemes, business model that attracts private investors, but in the meantime defends also the public interest. One project which is going on is the project of Statkraft in Devil hydropower. They're building a big hydropower there, which will add a lot to the reliability. It's an investment based on the private scheme, doesn't need any incentive from the government, and these are the type of investments we are trying to promote. Also for Vjosa, we want to invite a strategic investor who takes his own risk. We provide the maximum time for the usage of water and for resources. They have all the licenses, they can have all the licenses, but they can contribute with their private financing to make this project run. Not to put all the bill to the population or to the public, let's say the customer or the public purse. So these are some of the issues. Now, what we're going to do with the current, because we have inherited many contracts from the previous government, we're trying to create a market for them, a private market, and slowly to put also the private independent power producers in a scheme that they can supply this market. So reduce the import, but they can have a market and the market become liquid. We don't want to put more burden, as I said, to the public sector for new investments. Because one thing, and I want to repeat, which for many times in the Albanian discourse have been missing, is that any of these private investors should be financed by the public purse. People didn't know that. They always thought it's a private investor risk, and the government never explained to them. Now it's time that we are talking very openly with people. Of course, I'm not in a very comfortable position because I know some of the businesses, they feel they're being hit. But they're being hit because of the lack of liquidity, not because of my policies. But the situation, it's very easy to suck businesses in a government scheme and say, here we are, we will honor all the obligation, come and invest. But I don't have money. And you create all these arrears and it accumulates. And it comes to a point that when it comes to energies, the government should react. It cannot just go like this because somebody has to pay. And that's why I think it's time to revise the complete strategy how to deal with private investment. But I believe, and I'm telling you, there are many projects which are viable economically. And if there would be a demand, there are many industries which demand the energy in an affordable price. And hydro, it's an affordable way of producing electricity. And if those demand will grow in Albania with the development of various industries, I'm sure there will be a future for many of these private projects. And we will keep also some incentives as a transitory period. We will keep incentives to keep some of the investment running, but not all the risks should be borne by the government. Otherwise, what's the sense of bearing this?
So are you planning to attract foreign companies in the hydro industry as well as local?
Yeah. There are many foreign companies interested. I've received many groups who are interested in the big projects of Albania. And I think they have a future because Albania, as I said, have water resources. So there is a constant supply of water. So there is guaranteed production at the end.
Let us turn now to the oil industry, going sector by sector. I gather that substantial high-grade oil reserves have been found in parts of Albania by some major international companies such as Shell. Will these companies now be investing, would you say, in the oil industry? Is that the plan? Are you trying to encourage them to come in?
Yes, and these discoveries have brought Albania in a different picture when it comes to oil and gas. I feel that any time I'm in conventions or conferences, there is a high interest and everybody talks about the new discovery. I mean, to be realistic, the discovery has not been proven yet to be commercially available. We have to make clear because people develop the various expectations. They are still in the exploration phase. One well proved to be good quality and good pressure. They're drilling 2 more wells in order to see how wide is the basin, the reservoir, what are the quantities in order to make the economic calculus. Because, to be honest, those wells are very expensive. It's very deep oil. We're talking about more than 5,000 meters, which requires a lot of investment.
This is in the Fir area?
Yeah, it's in the Berat area. It's called Molist. So it's an area which is actually it's a natural extension of the Fir region area, which is already oil. So it's a kind of the same geology.
The same basin?
Yeah, the same basin. So that have attracted more interest from the private investors in the oil and gas field. We have other blocks to be for free, which are blocks to be launched for the first time after 20 years in an auction. And we are working very closely to prepare a set of rules, transparent rules, to increase the competition and to auction them. Not like they have been issued in the past, when one company presented a request and it was awarded an oil block, and sometimes they have done nothing. May you see any other blocks in Albania, they haven't done any investment because they were just people who wanted to get the license and try to farm out, to find somebody, an investor, to get those blocks. But it's not, if you don't invest in a preliminary phase to have good data, good seismic, you cannot even attract an investor. And that's why now that the prospects for oil are good, and if this will happen, will be true, it will immediately, this field of as we talk of Shell and Petromanas, it will be as it is expected. It will increase the Albanian oil production more than 50 or 60%. as it is now, which is very, very good news. And we have another block which we are going to auction in the future, and we are trying to make the best out of it. And if that will be also be successful, I think Albania will have a very good production of oil in the future, which will be a very good news for energy supply for the country, and which for development also of the homegrown industry of petrochemicals.
Also, I think important for the Albanian budget. I mean,
Absolutely.
To what degree, I mean, I've heard some criticism that Albania hasn't profited enough from its oil reserves, from its oil industry. I presume you're planning to make this more of a profitable industry, a revenue earner for the government.
Absolutely. This is one of the weakest points of the hydrocarbon industry. In the past, maybe also due to the fact there have been low interest on Albania, some of the contracts that were not negotiating well. The prices of oil have increased since, for example, 2004, 2005, when there was a renewed interest for the Albanian oil. We have to be careful now also with the future deals, and that's why auctioning and awarding them in a more transparent way creates more opportunity to negotiate the terms. In the meantime, we have opened a dialogue with the oil industry to revise some of the terms, and we are negotiating with them, we are discussing with them without hampering their rights or contracts. And I don't mean that we have to do immediate changes in the legislation to hamper their rights or to affect their rights. However, we have to create a system that will bring more yield, more income to the government. So the government take, in my opinion, should be much higher. Well, I cannot say much or more, but it should be higher. What would be the certain balance? We are working with it. It's not an easy strike. And some things we have to take into account, and I want to be very fair now with everybody and with the public. Even people talk a lot about oil, but you have to see what is the cost of oil in Albania, the quality of oil. We're not Saudi Arabia, we're not Kuwait now. The Albanian oil, it's in terms of quality, it's heavy oil. It doesn't have the same quality like in any other country, which is a lighter oil, better quality oil. So those elements should be taken into account when you negotiate oil contracts in the future, and also the current contracts. And that's what we are doing. Not to hamper the business, not to affect the investment in the sector, but in the meantime, to increase the government intake.
You have, by the way, revoked the license of one of the oil companies here, I gather. What is the reason for this?
No, we haven't revoked. We're in the process of verifying some or discussing some of the implementation of these contracts. Some of the contracts have been expired, like there are 2 blocks which Petromanas have taken to develop, but because they're focused on the other block, the one that they strike the oil, they have left a little bit behind those blocks, and I think it's time for the government to take them back if there will be no more financial commitment for future investment. Same is happening with some other 2 blocks which are awarded in time, but nothing has been gone so far, and that's what I'm saying. We are monitoring now all oil contracts, hydrocarbon contracts. We are conducting auditing, how they are respected, do the terms are fulfilled. That was an era which were neglected in the past, and we don't want, as I said, this is a very, very careful approach, because for us, industry it's important. We don't want to create unexpected expectation, something abruptly happening, and we are discussing with the industry, auditing them, but in the meantime, monitoring them properly, that if they don't conduct their investment, if they don't really have an intention to develop the oil fields, why they should keep it.
But it's very important to instill trust in foreign investors, that they know that the contracts once made are respected.
Absolutely, and that's what we did also when we changed some legislation with the VAT in December. We discussed with them, we took some of the concerns into account when it comes to the exploration phase, so we still excluded from the VAT. We imposed the VAT for the other for the other contracts which were more in a development phase and in more a production phase. However, we are mitigating also their risk. We have made the changes in the legislation that they will be reimbursed within 30 days when it comes to VAT, and we will try to mitigate any changes in the legislation which can affect their contracts, should be mitigated financially. But in the meantime, now it's time also to open a wider discussion. Does the country is getting the right share? and when it comes to royalties, maybe there is room for improvement, which has to be discussed with the industry, not to be done unilaterally. But why there is room for improvement? Because the price of oil has increased a lot. And because the price of oil increased and your future, your past plans about the future were based on prices of oil which were much cheaper. Now there is a windfall now, a kind of windfall income that you've gotten because of the increase of oil prices, and you have to share that with the country. Those tensions are normal in every country who has oil, natural resources, and that's why it should be a very careful approach. And I'm saying maybe I'm not very popular when I say that. Some people, there is always a pressure from the bigger public that they want the right share, and defining the right share is not very easy. However, that's why you have to communicate with the industry, take into account their risk, but in the meantime, take into account the windfall incomes they had because of the oil prices increase and what has been neglected in the past.
Well, let's turn, when we say prices and income and so forth, let's turn to natural gas, particularly the TAP pipeline. Could you give us an idea of the schedule, the timetable? When is the pipeline going to be built? How it will benefit Albanians in terms of employment, and how it will benefit the Albanian budget? Because I gather a lot of this gas is going to come through to Italy. It's already accounted for. So what is the purpose of TAP strategically, but also in terms of direct benefit for Albania?
Well, first of all, as I said, the fact that the pipeline goes through Albania, it has a positive spillover in any elements. I mean, investment, more jobs being created during the construction phase, income in the future, high-quality jobs, because people who will work with it in the future will be well-paid engineers or people with expertise, which are very, I mean, high-quality jobs, I can call. Plus, there would be available gas for the Albanian industry. We do also have our gas of our own, some also the shale discovery. Besides oil, there was gas, which we have to think of how we can make use of it more to the also to the Albanian territory. So the benefit, direct benefit, is very clear. I mean, it would be investment, local companies, local content. We are fighting very hard, also with the top consortiums, that to give more contracts or more jobs to the local companies
Rather than outside.
Yes, the access roads or construction phase, or supply the local supplier to get the benefit of it. I'm sure that they will get the benefit of it. Of course, there would be specialized companies coming from outside, but there are many other companies in the Albanian territory, and it's fair for the Albanian government to ask for that, because we have created all the conditions. We are doing everything in order for the project to go ahead in time. But public have some expectation in terms of jobs, in terms of contracts being awarded to local companies, and I think we are in negotiation with TAP to make that available and to make that.
And
possible.
what is the schedule? What is the time?
The schedule is that they will start next year, and the project sometimes is being affected not because of Albania, but for the other issues, not related with Albania, but rather more with the consortium. The financing is it's a complicated, expensive project. It's a project that runs miles and miles away, and always big projects, in my opinion, and this is also the practice, the history, takes a little bit more time than they are foreseen. So in my opinion, the plan was 2018, but maybe the project will take a little bit more.
But by then gas will be pumped through.
The gas will be. So it's a long-term project, and but it's very important for the country to do the maximum now. For my country, to prepare for that, which means development of the gas master plan, as I said, development, the strategy, how much we're going to use for power, and also designing what will be the industries that will be the intaker of this gas for the benefit of themselves and for development.
I was going to say this whole gasification process will take a change of culture in energy use. I mean, do you intend to gasify most homes in Albania?
That's what we need to study. I don't have a fresh answers for that. Now, there are some experiences to be drawn. Maybe they would be difficult that any Albanian household will be connected to the gas. There will be a very expensive project, plus the use of gas, because countries have different sort of pattern of using the mix of energy. And if I see the southern countries, the southern rim, the gas is mostly used for industrial purposes rather than consumers, because we are countries with a mild and warm climate. And countries with mild and warm climate, they are not very...
You don't need so much heating. And,
Plus, how you should see the cost of it. I mean, the cost of gasification, how economically viable it is, and that's why we need the master plan. But as a minister, I've been focusing, this is important for the future. Maybe the market forces will do that if they will see the economics behind it. But what I see now important is for the industry and for the power production. The use of gas for industry and power production. Gas, it will be a necessary ingredient for many industries in Albania. We have heavy industries which require gas, and it will have effect on the cost of energy use, and we can develop many other industries related with extractive industries or petrochemicals, as we have petrol. If we have, it would be more and more oil to be discovered in Albania, and if you have availability of gas, immediately you develop a petrochemical industry. I mean, the necessary conditions are there. Why not? I mean, these are one of the issues we have to focus in the future.
And the most important question for Albanian citizens is will this, at the end of the day, the gasification process, the tap and all the associated industries, will it increase or reduce my energy bill each month?
In my opinion, any new source and a reliable source will create stability in the energy bills. If you depend on one source, it can be cheaper now, but you don't know how it will be in the future if it's one source and always exposed to other phenomena. If you have a diversification in life, and this is not only it's for people as well. Many options you have future. If you have one option, it can be a great option now, but you never know what the future will bring with it.
Let me ask you also about alternative energies. As you know, in Western Europe and the United States, there's a lot of focus on biomass, wind power, solar, and so forth. To what degree is Albania developing, alternative sources?
We have a curse on that because we have so many water. So I think our natural instinct is to develop power depending on the water. Due to the water is the cheapest and the most reliable way. Because the other energy sources, renewables, which are called in the common language now in Europe, they need a lot of subsidies, to be honest. And as I said, we are having problem to subsidize even the new hydropower, let alone the fact with hydro or biomass. There are policies in European Union. Many countries are questioning those policies, to be honest. It's Germany who promoted this policy for their own reasons, and it affects the policy of Europe. But it's a policy which needs affordability in terms of financial sustainability financially, which means governments have always to transfer the burden to the consumers or provide government schemes in order to improve that. This is not the greatest challenge in Albania when it comes to renewable, because Albania is 100% of our electricity is based on renewables. There are rooms for improvement, of course, in the future when we'll have diversification with other, maybe also with hydrocarbon like gas. We can see, and that's why we are working with a strategy to try to increase maybe some usage of photovoltaic. Maybe that would be good. The solar energy can be good in some areas to be combined with the other energy sources, but they need careful studies. As we speak now, with the current scheme, it's not favorable in terms of financing. They come still a very expensive project for Albania, and we have other issues to deal. Unless we have to be very clear with the people and say that you have to sustain this burden for a long run in order to diversify. But if you ask me, I mean, we are trying all what we can to diversify also with other renewables. However, as a minister, my most important target is supply and with affordable price. This is good for consumers, this is good for industry. So we're not going to be stuck to some idea of renewable if we don't supply the basic needs of the population with energy or the industry, which normally should become from hydro or other sources like gas in the future.
Thank you very much. We'll break now for some adverts. And presumably, if Albania develops into an energy hub, you mentioned the TAP question, the Ionian, Trans-Ionian pipeline, that too will benefit the Albanian consumer. Could you sort of explain, in terms of relations with neighbors, with Kosovo, you've already mentioned, Montenegro, Croatia, with Greece, of course, as well, how Albania could function as a hub, as an energy hub in the region?
By, you know, as I said, I mean, the fact that we can connect, a connection would be between EAP and TAP, it creates you, it makes you a natural hub. Plus, Albania have some natural storage advantages, that we have some salt caves in Dumra, it's a region of Albania, that they have some storage capacities. Albania can develop also storage capacities for the future supplies, for supplies of other countries. And I think naturally Albania starts to become a hub, a regional hub of gas. And we are working also with, as I said, it's not an easy job. It's a long-term job. We are working with other donors, with other countries, to develop also a potential gas ring in the region, which will include also many other countries, and to have this ring with reverse flow, which cannot take only the gas from Russia, but also the gas from the Caspian Sea, or even any surplus from European Union, which can come from North Africa or other pipelines. There are many pipelines being discussed now. So, and creating this ring, and also Albania with some storage capacities, and having a connection of two pipes, it will have a quite important role.
So this would be plugged into the bigger European system?
Yes, absolutely. Now all the networks are interconnected. Europe is very interconnected. Europe will do more for interconnection, but I think what they have to do more is to diversify the source. And I think they will do that in the future, and the interconnections are there. They have to invest in more pipelines, but if there will be more sources of gas from also other parts of Africa or Middle East, and because there are great discoveries, you know, in Cyprus and Israel. And they're talking a lot to build a pipeline. And now, with the revolutionary invention with shale gas in the United States...
I was going to ask you, is there any shale gas prospects here? Or shale oil prospects?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't, I don't think, or at least it's not in my attention, that Albania geologically favors the shale gas. If they would say it would have been great. But so far I don't have any information, so I cannot just give you a clear answer about that. I know that there are some parts of Europe who are potentially more inclined to the shale gas naturally. The geology favors them. It would have been great, because shale gas has been proven a very cheap source of gas, and very reliable in that sense. The United States is talking now to export more, and that would be good to diversify also the sources of gas for Europe. Of course, the more, to be honest, there is a tension here, that the cheaper the shale gas and the more supply from the United States, maybe we'll put into danger some of these pipelines. That's a natural tension.
Why build them if we can get cheaper?
Yeah, that's true. But I still believe that the pipeline up to a certain distance, that would be the most favorable, the most reliable source of natural gas for Europe.
We've spent most of the time talking about energy, but you also cover other industries. Could you give us a sort of very brief overview of industrial development strategy of this government, aside from the energy sector? You know, what are the key industries? What are their prospects?
Mining also. I'm in charge of the mining, and mining industry is an important industry for the country. Albania is rich on natural resources. We have copper, we have chromium,
various minerals,
bitumen. We have many minerals, and there is a high interest. In the past, not all the policies have been developed in the right way. They have, instead of encouraging the serious investors, they were more fragmenting pieces or mining rights in a way that they never really grow up. Because if you treat them in a primitive way, or give the licenses to small player, they will never aggregate to create a strong industry, and they will fell prey of the competition always. We are putting a discipline on the mining now. We have started by disciplining, monitoring the mining, taking off licenses which are against the law, and we have taken off more than 140 licenses so far, licenses which were not performing, or not paying rents to the Albanian government, or not paying the other financial obligation to the government, so we took them off. We are doing now the new changes in the legislation for mining in order to encourage a stronger industry related to mining. And mining is an opportunity because not only to unearth the goods which are on the ground, but to create associated industries with that. Albania had a tradition on the past, and two elements, in my opinion, are needed for that: a right policy to encourage the investments to have a better concessions in terms of territory, in order to exploit those mines, to unearth the minerals, and encourage them to enrich and refine those minerals in the country. Because right now, what we see, most of our minerals, they go as a raw material for export. And
so to process them
yes,
here? Yes,
to process them here, to refine them, to process them here. This is also true for oil, which there are incentives to develop the refinery industry and the other petrochemical production. And also there is, in my opinion, there is enough incentives if with the right government policies for the processing industry in mining. There are some developments recently. There are more interest in refining minerals here because the rich minerals are gone. They are now being depleted, and they are the poor minerals. But the poor minerals, to make them value, they need investment. And another element which is related with the energy sector is important with it. Besides the besides the right policies to encourage the development of mining industry and industries related with mining, another element is the price of electricity. Because energy, those industries are energy intensive, all petrochemicals, the refining, the processing industries. They need all affordable price of energy and the sustainability and the let's say the reliability of supply. And that's why all the policies which affect the energy sector will have a direct effect on on these industries. And we are working on two tires. That's why we want to create an open market for energy. That's why we want to put all these independent producers directly to the consumers of energy, industrial consumers, in order to have a reliable supply. That's why we're investing also in connecting Albania with other networks, because there are sometimes surplus of electricity, but there is a lack of connection or capacities to trade. By putting them, we have a strategy to develop many of these extractive industries in nickel, in chromium, in copper, and petrochemicals. And I think the chances are very good that if we manage to solve the issues with electricity, the power sector, and with the right policies also in the mining, and we are working with it in this direction, more processing industries will be developed in relation with the so-called extractive processing industries.
So in terms of job creation, how do you see this developing? Can you give us a sort of estimate over
Absolutely, they create jobs. Of course, they don't create that much jobs like, for example, the façon sector, the sort of light industries that we're talking about. And the Albanian government also have promoted this type of investments. Those investments maybe can be vulnerable in the future. However, they are a very good source of employment because they are labor intensive. All these textile, shoes. And the Albanian government recently, we are preparing also a package to promote this industry. We also have created a facilitative legislation for them to have access to government properties in order to build their factories. So these are easy things that can mitigate the demands for employment. And the other industries that I was talking, they are more sort of long-term, more high-quality jobs, more intensive in capital, but also intensive in energy. But in the meantime, they can create many added value in the country. If you create a petrochemical industry, which it can be, it's not a fantasy. Albania had one in the 70s and 80s. Of course, it was an isolated system that was based on a... But if there is petroleum here, why not you develop the refinery? They're very close to the source. And if you have a refinery and if you have gas, why don't develop other chemical industries? Which maybe some countries don't want to stay away of it, but I think Albania cannot afford to lose those chances. The same with the mining sector or industries in relation to the processing of minerals. When we have chromium here or copper, why don't develop the industries that process these minerals?
Well, let me ask you sort of bluntly, in terms of the mandate of the remaining mandate of the government the next 3 or so years, As a result of your industrial policy, energy policy, would you say that living standards will go up? In other words, will employment prospects increase? Will earnings increase? Will the cost of living not skyrocket? In other words, can the Albanians expect a better economic environment for themselves, their children, over the coming years?
Absolutely. If all these policies in place or all these industries that we're talking will get in shape and develop, the spillover effect will be always positive. If it's more employment, more industry, more added value in the country, the GDP will grow, and also the distribution part of the GDP will grow. It means that the more people will get employed, they will have a more steady income, and absolutely any economic development will trickle down, will offer positive effects to any part of the population. That goes without saying.
So you're an optimist?
I'm an optimist. Albania, if they implement the right policies, and some tough measures are needed now, at the beginning of this mandate of this government, and if we be more transparent and the state to have a more efficient state, also in other elements of the public administration, but I'm not going to touch them now, Albania has a future, because Albania, it's a small country, it's well positioned in Europe, it's a good location, it has great potential in tourism, many natural resources. They can become a constant source for developing various industry in relation with them.
But is there sufficient political consensus? Because this sort of program will carry on to future governments. Is there sufficient political consensus on such a plan, development plan?
Well, I think there is no discussion in terms of do we need a consensus about the development plan. I think sometimes in Albanian politics the consensus are needed for some basic political issues or institutional issues, and very few is being talked about the economic side of the society. So I think the burden falls with the government to be transparent, to communicate with various actors, and to promote the policies. We need fiscal discipline, we need consolidation of our budget and consolidation of our financing, not to run on these sort of adventures of the past which brought us almost in the knees, and we have inherited, as everybody knows now. Nobody is happy to have an IMF program, but IMF program was the only way to keep the discipline, to consolidate our finances, our fiscal accounts, and there is no other way. Otherwise, the other way was total bankruptcy, which means chaos and uncertain future. Now is the beginning is the difficult years. Tough reforms are needed in the pension sector, tough reforms are needed in the energy sector and in some other sectors, and I think in the years to come, if those reforms are implemented correctly, and if the government, and I think the Albanian government has the will and is working every day with anybody, with any interested, with all the partners, with all the business, to be transparent, to be transparent and cooperative, to address their needs, but in the meantime to promote the right policies for the development of the country. And I think the consensus is there. People have understood that, and I think also the political actors, and I don't see any obstacle politically to promote the right policies of the government, including in the energy sector, including the industrial development, or promoting labor-intensive industries, or promoting tourism. Of course, the political consensus, and I don't want to sideline the political consensus, it's very important for political stability. We need a political consensus to move ahead very important reforms like territorial reform. We need political consensus to move ahead with the European agenda, and everybody should be on the same board. And the government is inviting the opposition to be part of it, because Albania cannot afford to lose other chances. Those are things which are needed. We need political consensus to deal with the justice sector. It's a sector which is vital for the performance of the country. Also, in the economic impacts there are very high, because at the end contracts should be enforced. Any investor would require an enforcement of law.
Well, the rule of law is key for any sector.
Yeah, absolutely. In my opinion, if there is a magic formula, there is no magic formula for development. However, one is proven for long. Countries which are run by the rule of law have better chances of economic development. And I think this is the duty of Albanian government. This is the requirement for all political forces to come to a consensus and to support the European agenda, the rule of law, the transparency. The good things will come after.
I think we'll stop there for now. I hope you don't run out of energy over the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, figuratively speaking, because it's, you have a big portfolio, a very important one, I think key one for Albania's economic development, but also its place in Europe for the future. So Damian Gjiknuri, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for being so candid, and good luck in your work.
Thank you. I will save some of the energy. However, there is always somebody to fill. There will be more people with energy in the future, for sure. That's a continuous process. That's the beauty of the democracy and the political process.
And hopefully it will help Albania in terms of its candidacy status for the European Union. Both the reforms in the energy sector, but also the rule of law that should accompany that. My second commentary today on an important European topic concerns how the West-East crisis impacts on the Balkans. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is reverberating throughout Europe and evoking memories of the disintegration of Yugoslavia. While the US and the EU announced largely ineffective sanctions on Moscow for its annexation of Crimea and its threats to further partition Ukraine, the Balkan response has also demonstrated some division and confusion. Kremlin actions have underscored the contradiction between state integrity and national self-determination. Serbia finds itself on both sides of the West-East divide. Belgrade's close relations with Moscow have placed it in an uncomfortable position of supporting its own territorial integrity regarding Kosovo, while muting its opposition to Ukraine's partition. Russian officials reassure Belgrade that the annexation of Crimea does not mean that Moscow will support Kosovo's independence. And in Kosovo, there is an opposite contradiction between support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and, of course, justifications for Kosovo's independence. Officials need to more clearly specify the clear distinctions between Kosovo and Crimea. While Kosovo faced attempted genocide that disqualified the legitimacy of Belgrade's rule, no population was under threat in Crimea when Moscow manufactured an ethnic crisis to divide Ukraine. Bosnia-Herzegovina will also become embroiled in the new West-East crisis. Leaders in the Serb Republic may play with the Crimean scenario to push for unification with Serbia, thus placing Belgrade in a very awkward international position, as it is also petitioning for EU entry. There will also be an economic impact among countries that have expanded their energy links with Russia. Gas supplies through Ukraine could be terminated by Moscow, and the shortages will affect consumers and businesses throughout Central and Eastern Europe. In the long term, cuts in Russian supplies will prove beneficial in weaning Europe away from dependence on Russian gas, which always comes attached with political strings. However, states such as Serbia that have signed on to Moscow's South Stream pipeline may suffer substantial losses if the EU pushes for energy diversification or imposes sanctions against Moscow. And here Albania is fortunate that it has avoided any dependence on increasingly unreliable Russian energy and is not politically entangled with Moscow. Unfortunately, we have already come to the end of the show. I have greatly enjoyed being with you, as always, and with my colleagues here at Albanian Screen. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy, be productive, and remain optimistic. See you all soon. Miru Pavshim.